On the morning of May 11th, 2025, a group of 5 friends parked at the Wave Cave trailhead in Gold Canyon, Arizona, about 40 miles east of Phoenix, and started walking. It was Mother's Day. The trail they had chosen runs roughly 3 miles round trip and climbs something like 800 feet. On a map, it is a short hike. Thousands of people do it every winter in trail runners and a t-shirt, take a photograph inside the cave at the top, and are back at their cars before lunch. The group carried about 40 ounces of water each. That is a little over a standard water bottle. 6 hours later, at around 12:45 in the afternoon, one of them called the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. They had run out of water. Several of them were in trouble. A 33-year-old man in the group, later identified by investigators as Noah Farabah, had become unresponsive. A bystander started CPR before the ambulance could reach them. Crews from the Superstition Fire and Medical District, the Mesa Fire Department, and the Pinal County Sheriff's Office ran a first alarm mountain rescue up the side of that hill. Multiple rounds of CPR were performed. He did not survive. The other 4 were helped down and declined to be taken to a hospital. The temperature in the area that day topped 100 degrees, roughly 10 to 15 degrees above normal, for the second week of May, according to the National Weather Service office in Phoenix. It was not July. It was not a record. It was an unseasonably warm spring Sunday on a 3-mile trail an hour from a major city, and that is the whole point. There was no cliff involved, no storm, no wrong turn. No one in that group did anything that would look reckless if you watched them walk past you in the parking lot at 7 in the morning. They went for a short hike on a warm day and stayed out too long with too little water, and one of them did not come home. This is not a freak accident in the Superstition Mountains. It is closer to the standard shape of the thing. Because the range that sits on the eastern edge of the Phoenix metro area, the one you can see from the freeway, the one with the state park and the gift shop and the ghost town attraction at the bottom of it, generates a documented and disproportionate number of search and rescue operations relative to almost any comparable piece of ground in Arizona. And the reason is not that it is the most extreme landscape in the American Southwest. It is that it is the most extreme landscape in the American Southwest that also happens to be a 40-minute drive from 5 million people. Start with the scale, because the scale is the first thing that lies to you. The Superstition Wilderness covers roughly 160,000 acres inside the Tonto National Forest, spread across Maricopa, Pinal, and Gila counties. It was set aside as a primitive area in 1939, designated as wilderness, and expanded to its present size under the Arizona Wilderness Act of 1984. Inside that boundary, there are about 180 miles of trail. Some of it is well maintained and clearly signed. A great deal of it is not. There are routes on the maps that are not trails in any sense you would recognize, unmarked cross-country lines that require real navigation skill to follow. And there are far more of those than there are of the maintained ones. Elevations inside the range run from around 2,000 feet in the western foothills to over 6,000 feet in the east, and all of it sits in the Sonoran Desert, where summer daytime temperatures routinely pass 110. Now hold that against what the Pinal County Sheriff's Office and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office actually deal with out there. Records reviewed by the Arizona Republic showed Pinal County running search and rescue teams into the Superstitions more than 20 times in a single year, averaging around 22 calls annually across a 3-year stretch, with Maricopa County running roughly 10 of its own in a typical fiscal year on its side of the line. Officials from both agencies described the same pattern in the same words. Some of the calls are injuries. Most of them are lost hikers, or in summer, hikers in heat distress. And the single most common factor, according to the people who go in after them, is that the person was not prepared. Not that they were reckless, not that they were inexperienced in general, that they walked into 160,000 acres of volcanic desert with the level of preparation you would bring to a city park. To understand why this specific range does this to people, you have to understand what you are actually standing on. The Superstitions are not a mountain range in the way the Rockies are a mountain range. They are the wreckage of a volcanic system. Between roughly 30 and 15 million years ago, this part of central Arizona went through an extended series of enormous eruptions. Ash flow tuff eruptions have been dated to around 24.5 million years ago, 18.5 million years ago, and just under 15 million years ago. Estimates put the volume of lava and ash laid down across the region during that period at something on the order of 2,500 cubic miles. When the magma chambers underneath finally emptied and collapsed, they left calderas behind. Then the crust lifted, and erosion went to work on the whole thing for millions of years. What is left is what you see from Highway 60, welded volcanic ash carved into cliffs, hoodoos, spires, and a maze of canyons cut into rock that was never laid down in orderly layers to begin with. Weaver's Needle, the 1,000-foot column that dominates the interior and sits at a summit elevation of 4,555 feet, is not a peak in the normal sense. It is a plug of fused volcanic ash that resisted erosion while everything around it wore away. That geology is the reason this place is so photogenic. It is also, in a very direct way, the reason it kills people. A range built out of eroded volcanic rock does not give you the thing your brain expects from a mountain, which is a legible shape. There is no single ridgeline to follow home. There is no obvious drainage that reliably takes you back to the road. One member of a group that got lost out there and had to be brought out overnight by search teams put it about as clearly as anyone ever has. He said the Superstitions do not allow you to walk a straight line, that they are riddled with canyons and walls. That is not poetry. That is a topographic fact with consequences. A person who wanders 400 yards off a trail in flat country can usually see where they came from. A person who wanders 400 yards off a trail here is standing at the bottom of a rock corridor with no view of anything except more rock, and that rock does something else. Dark volcanic surfaces absorb sunlight and radiate it back. Members of the Superstition Search and Rescue Team, the volunteer group that has spent decades working that wilderness, have described summer ground surface temperatures in the black basaltic sections of the range reaching around 180 degrees. The air temperature might read 110. The ground you are walking on, sitting on, or lying on is a different and much worse number. And there is almost nothing overhead. The Sonoran Desert grows saguaro, palo verde, and mesquite. None of those cast the kind of shade you need. In the heat of the afternoon on an open slope in the Superstitions, there is frequently no shadow anywhere within reach, large enough to put an entire adult human body into. Here is the mechanism that turns those conditions into a fatality, and it is worth understanding precisely, because the way it kills is not the way most people picture it. Your body sheds heat mainly by evaporating sweat. That system works as long as the air can take the moisture, and as long as you keep replacing what you lose. In desert air, sweat evaporates so fast you never feel wet, which means you badly underestimate how much water you are losing. As you dehydrate, your blood volume falls. Your heart works harder to move less fluid. Your core temperature starts to climb. The early symptoms are the problem: tiredness, thirst, a headache, feeling a little off. Those are the same signals you have pushed through 1,000 times in your life without consequence, so you push through them again, and somewhere in there, the condition crosses from heat exhaustion into heat stroke, and the organ that fails in a way that matters most is your brain. Confusion, poor coordination, irritability, bad decisions, certainty about things that are not true, which means the person least equipped to recognize that they are dying of heat is the person it is happening to. Public safety agencies across Arizona repeat the same guidance every year because of this. The majority of heat-related trail fatalities occur between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. Heat illness can develop in well under an hour in extreme conditions, and it does not care how fit you are. The county-level data underneath all of this is genuinely difficult to sit with. The Maricopa County Department of Public Health tracks heat-related deaths across the metro area every season and publishes the totals. In 2023, the county confirmed 645 heat-related deaths. In 2024, the final figure was 608, which represented the first year-over-year decrease since 2014. In 2025, the county identified 430. Buried inside the 2024 report is a detail that reframes everything. From June 18th to July 31st of that year, a heat-related death occurred in Maricopa County every single day for 44 consecutive days, 355 deaths across that stretch. And here is the finding that matters most for anyone standing at a trailhead. More than half of all heat-related deaths in Maricopa County in 2024 occurred on days when the National Weather Service had calculated the heat risk as moderate, not extreme. Not the days with the red warnings and the emergency alerts on everyone's phone. The ordinary days, the days that feel manageable. Noah Faribault died on a day like that, in May, when the forecast was warm rather than dangerous. The extreme days scare people into staying home. The moderate days do not, and that is precisely why they take more people. Now layer the second problem on top of the heat, because the superstitions have a specific structural trap that catches even people who bring enough water. It is a range you descend into. A representative from the Pinal County Sheriff's Office once described it plainly while explaining why they get so many rescue calls. People start hiking down, and then they realize it is a reverse mountain and they have to hike back up. Then they cannot make it, and someone has to go get them. Think about what that does to the arithmetic of a hike. On a normal mountain, you spend your freshest energy climbing and your tired energy descending. Here, on a large number of the popular routes, the going out half is downhill and cool and easy in the morning, and the coming back half is uphill and exposed and in the middle of the afternoon. Every step out is a step you will have to buy back later at a much higher price, at the worst hour of the day, with less water than you started with. That is the geometry of the Wave Cave hike, of long stretches of the Peralta Corridor, and of routes all through the interior. And it is completely invisible while you are enjoying the walk out. The Siphon Draw route up to the Flatiron, one of the most popular hard hikes in the Phoenix area, adds a different version of the same trap. It is roughly 6 miles round trip with something like 2,700 feet of gain, and the upper section involves scrambling on steep, loose, slick rock. The state park's own guidance says only experienced hikers in good condition should attempt it, that it is not a designated, maintained trail all the way to the top, and that it is not recommended in hot weather. Rockfall is a documented hazard on it, and the deaths there have not all been heat. In 2022, a 21-year-old named Richard Jacobson fell several hundred feet from the Flatiron summit area while taking a photograph and was killed. In September of 2024, Christopher Childers, a 53-year-old Phoenix attorney and lifelong Arizona hiker, left home early on a Saturday morning for the Flatiron route and never returned. His family realized something was wrong when they saw that his phone's location had stopped moving on the mountain. He had died in a fall. He was not a tourist. He was not unprepared. He was a man who had spent his life in that desert, on a trail he knew, on a route thousands of people finish safely every year. But the thing that makes the Superstition Mountains statistically strange, the factor that no other range in Arizona has in the same measure, is not geological at all. It is a story. Since the late 19th century, This range has been attached to the legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine, a supposed cache of gold associated with a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, who died in 1891. The Arizona Republic began publishing accounts of people searching for it in 1892. It has never been located, and there is no verified evidence that the mine as described ever existed. That has not slowed anything down for 130 years. And the legend does something to human behavior that ordinary scenery does not. It does not just bring people to the mountain. It pulls them off the trail. It gives them a reason to leave the marked route, to go up a side canyon nobody else is in, to go alone, to go in months when no reasonable person hikes there, and to keep going when they should turn around. Search and rescue members who work that wilderness have said it directly. Treasure hunters typically venture off trail. That single behavioral fact is why the casualty pattern here looks different from a national park's. Look at what that produced in July of 2010. 3 men from the Salt Lake City area, Curtis Merworth, Ardian Charles, and Malcolm Meeks, drove to Arizona to look for the Lost Dutchman mine. Reported ages for the 3 vary between accounts, but Charles was the eldest, and 2 of the men had known medical conditions. Merworth had been in that same wilderness the previous year, had become lost, and had called for help on a cell phone. He was hospitalized with dehydration. For this trip, he did not bring the phone. They parked at a trailhead on the edge of the wilderness, apparently slept in the car, and walked in the next morning. The temperature that week ran above 110. They planned a short trip and carried limited supplies. When they were 2 days overdue, family in Utah called authorities. Deputies found the empty car, and a search began that afternoon. What followed was one of the largest ground searches in the recent history of that wilderness. An area of roughly 96 square miles, helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, including one with thermal detection, bloodhounds, 45 searchers on horseback, and more than 300 on foot. It ran for a week. Then, over the following months, agencies and volunteers went back in more than 20 separate times. Not one clue was found, not a piece of gear, not a note, not a track that led anywhere. 3 men had walked into 160,000 acres, and the landscape had simply closed over them. In January of 2011, 6 months later, an author and longtime prospector named Rick Gwynn was out in the wilderness working on his own research about 2 miles east of the first water trailhead when he found 2 sets of remains on a steep slope of loose black volcanic talus near Yellow Peak. Nearby were 2 umbrellas the men had been using to try to make their own shade. Dental records identified them as Charles and Meeks. Merworth's remains were located separately that same month, in a shaded spot beneath a tree, in a position searchers interpreted as someone who had lain down. That is the detail that should stay with you. The men understood, at least partly, what they were walking into. They brought umbrellas because they knew there would be no shade. They had a plan, and they were found on black rock that can run near 180 degrees on the surface in summer, 6 months after 350 people with aircraft and dogs failed to find them from the same starting point. The Merworth case is not an outlier in this range, it is a category. In December of 2009, a 35-year-old Denver man named Jesse Capon drove to Arizona for the same reason. Capon worked the night shift as a bellhop at a hotel downtown. He had saved vacation time for 2 years so he could take a full month off, and he had traded his car for a Jeep to handle the rough access roads. After he disappeared, his family found more than 100 books and maps about the Lost Dutchman legend in his apartment. He had set a pattern of going into the mountains for about 3 days at a time and coming out for 2. He checked out of a motel in Apache Junction on December 2nd. His Jeep and camp were found on Tortilla Mountain, in the southern part of the range, with no sign of him. Search dogs went in on December 23rd and found nothing. Rain washed out the boot tracks. What happened next is the part that tells you what this terrain actually is. 2 years later, in December of 2011, a hiker on top of Tortilla Mountain at 4,892 feet found a glass jar with a note inside. The note read Colorado, Jesse Capon, and the date December 4th, 2009. He had been standing on that summit one day after entering the wilderness. Volunteers from the Superstition search and rescue team had by then been going out nearly every weekend for 2 years. They kept going out. On November 24th of 2012, almost 3 years after he was last seen, they found a day pack containing GPS equipment, a camera, and Capon's driver's license at the bottom of a cliff. Above it, on steeper ground, a boot, and then his remains wedged in a crevice roughly 35 feet up a sheer rock face. The medical examiner's office confirmed the identification. The location was about half a mile from his own campsite. Half a mile, 3 years, in an area that had been searched repeatedly by people who knew exactly where to look. This is the pattern the legend generates, and it goes back much further than either of those cases. In June of 1931, a 66-year-old man from Washington, D.C., named Adolph Ruth, was packed into the range with his gear to search for the same mine. He was in poor health at the time. He was never seen alive again. A formal search ran 45 days before it was called off. On December 10th of that year, an archaeological expedition found a human skull, later identified through dental records by the anthropologist Elis Hrdlicka as Ruth's. His remaining bones were recovered in January of 1932, scattered by scavengers some distance away. 2 holes in the skull were interpreted by Hrdlicka as gunshot damage, and that interpretation, reported nationally during the Depression, is where most of the folklore about this range being cursed or guarded actually comes from. It is important to be careful here because the case has never been resolved. Other officials at the time argued that Ruth, elderly and unwell, more likely died of thirst or heart failure, and that the damage to the remains could have other explanations. Nearly a century later, there is no forensic conclusion available to settle it. What is not in dispute is the part that matters for anyone hiking there today. A man in fragile health walked alone into remote desert in June looking for a mine that has never been found, and the desert kept him for 6 months. So what does all of this actually tell you to do differently? The guidance from the agencies that manage and respond to this ground is unglamorous and specific. The Superstition Fire and Medical District's own statement after the May 2025 death is the shortest version of it. As temperatures climb, so does the risk, and heat illness can set in fast, even for experienced hikers. Do not hike this range in the middle of the day in the warm months. Not be careful. Do not do it. If you are on trail after 10 in the morning between roughly April and October, you are in the window where the majority of these deaths happen. Carry vastly more water than the walk appears to require, and understand that 40 ounces is a fraction of what an adult loses on an exposed climb in triple-digit heat. Turn around based on water remaining, not on distance covered, because the return leg on a reverse mountain always costs more than the outbound leg did. Tell a specific person exactly where you are going and exactly when you will be back, because the difference between a search area of 96 square miles and a search area of 1 canyon is a single text message sent before you leave. Do not count on your phone. Coverage inside those canyons is unreliable, and even where a call goes through, a rescue in that terrain takes time that heat stroke does not give you. Carry a satellite messenger or personal locator beacon if you are going into the interior. Stay on maintained, marked trails, and understand that a large share of the routes drawn on maps of this wilderness are unmarked cross-country lines that require route-finding ability you may not have. And if you are going for the reason so many have gone, the mine has been searched for continuously since 1892 and has never been found or proven to exist, while the search for it has a documented body count. The Superstition Mountains are not cursed. Cursed would imply intention, and there is no intention out there. There is welded volcanic ash carved into a maze over 15 million years, and dark rock that stores the sun and gives it back, and canyons that hide people so completely that 350 trained searchers can walk past them, and an air temperature that turns your own judgment against you before it turns anything else against you. What makes this range unusual among genuinely dangerous American landscapes is not any one of those things. It is that all of them sit inside sight of a metropolitan freeway. You can see the range from a strip mall parking lot. There is a state park at the base with a paid entrance, restrooms, and a gift shop. There is a ghost town attraction down the road with a saloon. You can be standing on the trail 9 minutes after locking your car, and every part of that experience tells your nervous system that you are inside the managed world, where things are signed and staffed, and someone is watching. The managed world ends where the pavement ends. It ends about a quarter mile in. Everything past that point is 160,000 acres of Sonoran desert that has been doing exactly what it does for millions of years and has no mechanism for noticing that you arrived. Come back to that Sunday morning in May. 5 people, a 3-mile trail, a warm spring day that was not even a record, about 40 ounces of water each, which felt like plenty at 7 in the morning when the air was still cool and the walk up was easy. 6 hours later, a call for help from a group that had run out of water on a hill an hour from Phoenix, and a 33-year-old man who did not walk back down. Noah Faribaugh was not on an expedition. He was not looking for gold. He was not off trail, and he was not in the backcountry, and he was not in July. He was on a short, popular, well-known hike on Mother's Day. That is the honest weight of this place, and it is not in the legend or the disappearances or the century of stories about a mine nobody has ever found. It is in how small the mistake has to be. The range does not need you to do anything dramatic. It only needs you to be out on the rock a couple of hours longer than you planned, in heat that felt reasonable at the trailhead, with a bottle that felt like enough. Everything after that happens on the mountain schedule, not yours.